Okay, I've got lots of interesting questions, but Caesar, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Why did you do what you did, and then why are you doing what you're doing right now? And then I'll throw some questions.
Such a philosophical question.
Yes.
What am I doing right now? If only we all knew the answer.
Yeah. Before we come to Android One and Mobile Tsunami.
Yeah, that's true. But it's a pleasure being here. I think I run a product for Android One and Chrome OS for Google, and been at Google for a long time. And we launched Android One earlier this year in India. It's our effort to sort of get to the next billion users of Android, which starts off with building the right set of, or enabling our partners to build the right set of hardware, building the right sets of services and software that we can bring to the next billion users, as well as working with all of you, many of you who are developers and have great products and services to cater to the next billion users. So that's broadly what our charter is. My personal goal, I feel, I grew up in India, in Delhi. I feel deeply passionate about this market, and I feel the potential that we have if we are able to connect the next billion users to the internet and really unlock that, their true potential is immense. So that's what really excites me.
Right. So somewhat sort of quick descriptional, definitional questions. What is Android One versus Android originally?
It's a great question. So Android is our open source operating system for phones. Android One is a program that we've created to bring the optimized Android experience for the next billion users. So it's also, it's an open source program. It's exactly the same. It's actually, from a software point of view, it's very similar to the Nexus build. So it's a pure Android experience. So, and part of that is we have done a bunch of things in the program to enable people to bring really, really high quality but low cost hardware. This is my default phone. I don't know if you guys have used the Android One phones from Micromax, Carbon, and Spice. They cost around 6,000 rupees, but when you use them, you'll realize these are very, very high quality experiences, right? They feel really good. They feel like a phone that any one of you in this room will have. And we want the next 100 million people in India, when they buy smartphones, to be able to have that high quality mobile experience. So that's broadly what Android One is.
So how many in the room have Android One phones? What are the rest of you doing here is the question.
Well,
but anyway.
I think the rest of them probably have a lot more money, and they probably want to buy 12,000 rupee and 15,000 rupee and 20,000 rupee phones. Rest assured, Android One phones and those prices are also coming. So hopefully by next year, all of you will have Android One phones.
Right.
Because you've got kids.
Okay. Anyone for kids and differentiated market, huh? Yeah. Yeah.
That's true. The comment was that if you buy a 25,000 phone with kids, it's only going to last 2 months.
So, Caesar, the other thing is you're also, in Android One, you're working with OEMs. You're working with companies closely, and that's in some ways different from what you were doing earlier.
No, that's not true. Android has always been an open ecosystem program, right?
Is it more integrated for Android One?
I think the difference, so let me talk a little bit about how what Android One brings on the hardware front to OEMs. So on Android One, what we do is, when we were talking to a lot of our partners like Micromax, Carbon, Spice, other partners in other countries, what we realized was that there's a certain set of common things that all hardware OEMs have to do to bring a phone to market, right? They have to pick the right sets of components. They have to sort of do the software bring up on those components. And then they have to work on making sure that the product, the software is tested, it's high quality, there are no security issues. And so as we talked to a lot of them, they felt that this sort of common set of stuff could actually be done in a single common way, and that would provide leverage to the overall ecosystem and would bring down the cost of producing this hardware. So what Android One does is we have a reference design. Think of it as like a blueprint for your house, right? And then there's a set of qualified components. Think of them as, if you're building a house, it's a set of windows and doors that have, in this case, camera modules and speakers that have been tested. And the software on that we know works really well, works really fast, it's really secure. And so we bring all that to the table, and then the OEMs sort of have this menu, literally, of options. And they say, okay, I'm going to build a 5-inch phone, with a high-resolution display or with an 8-megapixel camera. They pick the components, they put their design together, and then they can bring the phone to market. So that's what Android One enables our hardware partners to do.
Right. So in Google, you're obviously always evolving. I was reading in Eric Schmidt's book that you have almost 500 innovations a year on your search alone. Yeah. So I'm sure this is an evolving process, right? So what did you start out when it came to Android One, and where have you reached today that we are, I mean, the product that we are seeing today, and what is it likely to go to in the near term and the longer term?
It's a great question. I think, around earlier this year, we've been looking at this for a long time, but somewhere around earlier this year, we started looking at the growth of where the next billion people are going to start using computing from. And we found that a lot of the growth is actually coming from places like India, Indonesia, Brazil, Mexico. And the growth actually of these people adopting smartphones is generally coming from the mid to low end of the segment. But what tends to happen is most of these markets are not carrier subsidized, right? Unlike in the US where you take a subscription from a carrier and therefore your iPhone, which actually costs $600.
So you're saying that you were trying to meet people's computing needs and not necessarily the communication needs, or which came first?
No, so I think you can't really meet the communication needs unless you've met the computing needs.
Yeah.
So we're sort of at the ground level of Android One. So what we realized was first we need to address the hardware issue, make that be generally available. Then next comes the data issue, right? So that's something that we are working on. We're also thinking about lots of services and software that are actually exclusively designed for these billion users. I mean, we're actually at a very interesting point in history. If you think about it, all of you in this room, you all started using computing. I did, at least on a laptop or a desktop. Anyone here started using computing on a phone? No, right? What are the next billion users?
NPC 2020 or something.
Exactly. So, but the next billion users, I look at my daughter who's 7 years old, and the first computing device she's held in her hand is a phone. That is true. In fact, in order to do that, we're actually building out an engineering team in Bangalore and Hyderabad for Android One. So if any of you are interested in building services for the next billion people, come talk to me. And so we'll gradually go and look at the market and build the right products for them.
So tell us about the way you are dreaming about this. Right? I mean, I know dreams kind of can become reality pretty soon, but if you were to look even 18 to 24 months ahead, what are the kind of problems of your consumer or your user that are you trying to solve or fix that we could actually experience in the form of a product?
Well, that's a great question. I think hardware is one. Data connectivity is a very big issue. Right? A lot of users, the next 100 million users in India, don't understand data. Data is in many ways very confusing to most people, right? If I ask most of you, what will you get for 100 MBs? Right? Can you answer? No, right? And so it's very difficult for us to ask this to the next 100 million people who don't understand MBs and GBs and these complicated terms. So I think we need to make data much more accessible. And note, I'm not saying affordable, I'm saying accessible, and we need to help people understand what they're getting for data. Then next on top of that, there are a bunch of services that we need to build out on top of this, which not just we, but I'm hoping our whole ecosystem together will work towards to build for the next.
Give us an example.
Actually, one particular area that I'm particularly passionate about is apps around personal safety. Right? I have a lot of family in Delhi. Whenever my sisters go out or my mother goes out, I worry about it. And there's actually a lot of innovation that's happening in the Indian market. I know of at least 4 or 5 different companies and apps that have come out that are trying to solve the same problem. I don't think anybody's quite cracked it, but I think if you think about, if we're able to build a product that actually helps people genuinely feel safer and be safer, it can actually really transform people's lives in a very meaningful way. So, there are thousands and thousands of different cases like this. Like, in India, a lot of products are still bought in physical retail, right? Like, how do you find out where you're going to get the best product or where you'll get the best service? The number of spaces that are open is immense. So, the way I think about computing, and I really like Tarkan's talk on this, is if you think about where users are currently and you find an inefficiency in the market, that's what you need to pick up and then go try to solve. And honestly, if you think about India, we have a ton of inefficiency to get rid of. So the opportunity is immense.
Okay, I'm going to come to questions very quickly in a bit. Just give me a sense. I mean, just give me a minute. Let me finish a few that I've already got on Twitter. Thoughts on mesh networks and how Android One users may take it to avoid data usage, like in Hong Kong?
Oh, that's actually that's very interesting. I mean, we're really looking at mesh networks not so much to avoid data usage, but we feel that in a large country like India or Actually, even more importantly, like places like Africa, where data networks are not yet as widely spread, mesh networking could be very useful. Already I think of like in India, people exchange media using SD cards. Now you think about it, that's an inefficiency. Why should you have to take a physical SD card out of one phone and put it into another phone? You have two phones, they both have network connectivity, both have Wi-Fi. Why not be able to actually just pass data around? So that's a big area for us to go tackle. And there are a number of companies I've seen who are doing and building interesting products in that space.
So here's another question, Arvind Krishnaswamy. He says, this seems to be like a closed ecosystem, while it is open source at one level because you manage contributions, timelines, and key decisions are closed. Do you agree with that?
No.
Okay. Why
It's,
not?
it's because it's an ecosystem-based thing. We are enabling the base platform, and then our partners who are in the hardware space, our partners in content and apps are making the
So let me flip the question around. Tell us about how open your system truly is.
It's a completely open system, right? If you think about it, Android One is basically Android. Android is completely open source. Android is, I don't know, open source is like beer or whatever, but what that means is anyone can take Android and you can put your own experience on it. People are putting it on different types of phones. They're building different kinds of experience on the phones. We've enabled all that. People
And all of this
putting
extends
Android
to Android One as well, is what you're saying? Okay, right, questions? I'm going to collect questions together, yeah? Okay, go ahead. Okay, so how do you place the battery in the framework when you develop the phone? Okay, next question.
Probably a farmer or a person would have an Android One phone, right? But there is no network by which he can able to efficiently use that particular phone. So what Google is probably doing to tackle this particular problem?
You're saying provide the network as well?
Yeah, because that's important.
That's critical. Okay, any more questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to batch all the questions together?
Yeah. My question is basically, let's say I have an app which I think is going to be really useful to this 1 billion users. How do I get it as a default app on Android One?
Okay, any more before we take, okay, one more, then we come back. Yeah, go ahead.
When are we going to have Android phones which sync as beautifully as iPhones? So when you take it out of the box, everything syncs nicely. When you can do that, we'll all switch over.
So you're saying it doesn't sync or what?
It doesn't sync.
Okay, it doesn't sync. Okay, he's the right person to answer that, I think, anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll come back. Go ahead.
First
question was about
question was about battery.
juice. Yeah.
So the question was like, you're thinking of all the components, what about the battery? I think the battery is a very critical component. And I think we're trying to enable a whole set of choices of battery. If you look at the cost of a battery, it's a significant part of a phone's bill of materials. And so, partners are bringing a whole set of different batteries. We're also trying to see if we can help technology companies that are building new battery technologies come to market faster to try to create innovative stuff. So there's a whole lot of stuff for Android One that has not yet come out that we're working on. And it's not just for Android One, even on Android, for regular Android phones. Like even if you're paying 50,000 rupees for a phone, you still want a battery that lasts very long. Yeah, at least a day. And the thing is, this is an area that we have to. And battery technology is something that can fundamentally change computing overall. It's not just for phones, right? I mean, Tesla and others are investing in it for their cars. So
the question was, what's happening in battery innovation technology which might change?
I'm not a battery expert, so I won't get into that. But I am as interested in getting more battery innovation as you are, and I'm hoping I get batteries which allow me to use my phone for like weeks and weeks.
Right. So there was a question on networks. You're saying, is that something that you would at all look at?
Networks. So this is where we are working. We work for the initial Android One launch, we work very closely with Airtel to bring a plan for all the Android One users. But this is where we want to work with all the carriers, right? Google's not a carrier, we're a software provider. And we feel, at least in India, I'm actually very bullish about how strongly the carriers are rolling out very high quality services. 4G is starting to happen. So I think it's, we can do a lot more, but it's starting to happen. The other area is around, Wi-Fi hotspots and stuff, and those are also growing very well. But in general, like, connectivity is something that I think, we all together as an ecosystem and a computing ecosystem need to work more on.
Right. So, and how's your phone going to sync better? The question from.
Actually, in Android phones sync pretty well. Android Lollipop release, the latest release, has a whole bunch of enhancements that enable syncing a lot better. We hope you'll give it a try. I think you'll find that it's much better than the other alternative you mentioned. But could we do better? Of course. And the main thing is, if you look at the amount of pace of innovation that we've been doing on Android, it is dramatic. Right? L was one of the biggest releases we've ever done, and the pace of innovation is just going to keep continuing very broadly. And the more powerful thing is, we are doing this pace of innovation across a broad ecosystem. So the amount of choice you have in this ecosystem of being able to buy phones from Samsung, LG, Micromax, Carbon, Spice, is what, to me, is really exciting.
So how many of you within Google working on this now?
We don't give out specific numbers, but this is a very big area of investment.
And you'll have also the Hyderabad, Bangalore teams working.
We are building out engineering teams in Hyderabad and Bangalore.
Okay, more questions? Yes. Sorry, the gentleman with the microphone. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Bhuvan and from Aadhaar. So are you also looking at the user interface part of Android One? I feel it's becoming quite complex.
Okay.
And especially other Google products also. I see user interface part is becoming more complex. Earlier I find it very user friendly.
Okay, next question. Yes. Okay, so strategy behind different models and different OEMs. I mean, Motorola versus HTC versus, okay, for Android.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You did not answer a question posed.
Oh, sorry, we missed one question, which was, how do you exactly the way you do currently with Android phones? So you'd go work with the OEMs, Micromax, Carbon, Spice. They can pre-install default apps on their phones.
Okay, so let's take.
No, these phones actually belong to our partners, right? We are just enabling the ecosystem, and beyond that, like, our partners, you should just go work with them and put it on their phones.
Hi, you just touched about carriers subsidizing the hardware cost in other countries, right? What's the plan for India? Because if you subsidize, it will be better penetration for villages, and more billion people can get connected faster.
I think it's really a business model question. So I think you should ask this to some of the carriers in India. But my naive understanding is, it depends a lot on whether the population in the country pays for data in a prepaid manner or a postpaid manner. And if you're in a prepaid manner, then it's just, there's just less money in the systems. It's not like the carriers don't want to do this. It's just when people are willing to pay postpaid, right? In the US, I pay $60 a month, and it's a two-year locked-in subscription. I'm sure many of you here are doing the same. So I think the economics in the countries are very different.
So I think there's a question on the hardware from this gentleman.
Oh, sorry. So Nexus is our program where Nexus is the way we sort of instantiate every version of our new software. So Nexus 6 that we just launched is what Android Lollipop was done for. And so that's, it basically showcases what Android Lollipop can do, and thereafter we open source and give out the OS to everyone. And so that's basically what we do with Nexus. And Nexus is actually, this year's Nexus is a Motorola product. Each year we work with one partner very closely to go build it out. And Motorola is actually the partner that we picked this year.
So what's the graph like in India for sales between I'm sure obviously it's going to be different, but proportionately, if you keep precise price, between the Nexus and the Android ones that you've just launched?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but Nexus actually.
Okay, let me put it this way. Are you happy with it?
Oh, we're very happy with it. We're very happy with it, and we're very happy with it. In fact, the Micromax Canvas A1, which is their first Android One phone, is still the #1 phone on Amazon. It's been throughout. Around Diwali, all the OEMs bought the phones into physical retail. They're still rolling it out across physical retail. General reception seems to be very good. We're getting very good feedback on the quality, the experience of the phone. So we're very happy.
So let me ask the flip question again. What's the three criticisms that you've got which you will use to improve the product?
Great. I think the first criticism that we've got, which is a very standard criticism in India, Why isn't it cheaper? You should be able to give this to us for even cheaper. Of course, we're working on it hard. I think the second criticism has been people want more types of products. The first product we came out of gate with was a 4.5-inch phone working with our 3 partners. The partners as well as users want 5-inch phones. They want high-resolution cameras. They want better displays. They want metal cases. Our partners are working on that. Unfortunately, hardware takes a little bit longer to build than software, and so those things will come to market over the next few months. Beyond that, I think there's a lot. Data has always come up, and how do we enable these phones to have more accessible
So, for instance, I got a question here on Twitter which says that what's the kind of uptake you're seeing on voice search, right? Which in a way is asking also what kind of applications you're seeing most used on your.
I don't remember the exact numbers on voice search, but again, voice search is something that's very strongly tied to data, right? And as when people have data access, I think we have to solve that, and then we'll get to like services that.
Right. I think there was one more question here somewhere.
Yes, you talked about services being differentiated play on the next billion devices. I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Just stand up. Help.
With the lights, it's very difficult to see.
So you talked about building some services on top of these next billion phones. Can you talk a little more about how you're enabling that beyond your core Google products? So if we were to build something, we were to come talk to you, we can do that offline too.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little more how you're going to enable that? Because I think if you, at least in my mind, if there isn't a big differentiator other than price between Android One and the core Android, unless you differentiate it with some localized services, it may not really take off the way it should.
So to be clear, we aren't trying to differentiate between Android and Android One. When I talk of the next billion users, I'm talking of billion users of Android. Android One is one part of the overall Android ecosystem, right? So my hope and expectation is that all of us together, all the developers, the ecosystem, will build these services catering to the billion users. Some of them you should talk to us about, but I also hope you will build them whether or not you're working with us or talking to us, right? And so that's what I want to encourage everyone to do is think about the next billion users, think about how they're consuming computing and what is going to be important for them, and then let's all collectively together go and figure out how to address their needs.
Okay, so last few questions, and yes, go ahead. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Hello. I have one question here.
Where do you think the area of disruption is going to be? Because the way and the purpose for which they are going to use the phone is going to be completely different. So is it going to be in rural? Is it going to be in farming?
Okay.
Or where do you see this?
Will the next billion users use phones fundamentally differently from the previous billion? I think that's really the question.
So
and how are you?
I feel, yes, the next billion users will use phones fundamentally differently. I don't know how they will use it. I don't think that question has been answered yet. And I think that's it's one of those questions that all of us together collectively will target and answer. The reason I feel they will use it differently is because the first computing device they're getting in their hands is a phone. And a phone is very, very different from what was a computer. When I got my first computer, I was in engineering school, engineering college here, and it had no connectivity, right? And the first, you got a 14.4 kbps modem. Anybody remember a 14.4 kbps modem, right? Now my daughter...
Almost everyone in this room, yeah.
Hopefully.
Maybe not 6 years later.
Maybe 6 years. But my daughter opens up my phone, and she has a phone that's connected on 3G immediately, and she can do voice searches on it. It's a fundamentally different way of using computers. I remember a place I was driving, and my daughter said, she asked me, how many bones does a snake have? And having grown up with that history, I said, let me get home and I'll tell you. And she said, why don't you look it up at the next red light and tell me? Right? That's a fundamentally different way in which the next generation is thinking about computing. Right? Again, if you think about my mother, horrifyingly, writes me emails with without spelling out all the letters, like you, are, things like that, right? And it's not because she's a kid. I mean, this is how she's gone to computing. That's also a very different way of using computing, right? Like my English teacher would have whipped me if I wrote you instead of YOU, right?
Right. Okay, so last quick question. Yes, there's someone there, and is there anyone?
So one question here.
Yeah. Where
So
are you?
Very few Android phones have the latest. Here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Very few Android phones have the latest version of Android, right? And with programs like Android One, I feel that this problem is going to get worse. And this is a slide that Apple likes to play every time in its keynote. So how is it something that How are you going to tackle that?
So thank you very much for bringing that up wherever you are, because that's one of the.
Look, 11 o'clock.
The tough questions come
Oh,
from the
there.
dark. The
Oh,
tough
there,
questions
there.
come from the dark corners.
Yeah. No, no. Can I respond to his question if you don't mind? I think it's a very, very good question because I forgot one of the key aspects of Android One. On Android One, all the phones, Google is responsible for the software build and for delivering updates. So these will be some of the first phones to keep getting to get Android L, as well as they will keep getting updated. So that's one fundamental difference between like other Android phones and Android One. On Android One, Google will be responsible for delivering updates. So it's actually one of the goals of Android One is to solve the exact problem you're mentioning, which is phones falling behind in versions as new versions coming out. So we're working very hard on L. Those will come to all the Android One phones very soon.
So last question, we've completely
So
run out
I
of
had
time.
already
Yeah,
raised
go
a
ahead.
question about user interface, so I would like
Yes,
to ask.
of course. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I already-
I have a small brain, so many questions, I get overloaded.
You should learn from your daughter, I think.
I actually should, Maybe I should have like an app on my phone which remembers all the questions. In terms of user interface, I think your question was about user interfaces getting more and more complicated. With Android Lollipop, we actually took a very major step in rethinking the user interface. And if you look at the Android Lollipop user interface that's come out, it's really delightful. It's very fun. But as part of that, we've also been thinking about how to simplify it. The reality is we're never going to have the perfect user interface, right? It's always work in progress, right? You can always keep making it better. And so this is something that we're deeply committed to. Simplicity is very, very important. We care deeply about it. And so we'll keep working at it, and hopefully it'll get better.
Right, we've run out of time. Thank you very much. We've run out of time completely. Thank you very much, Caesar.
Thank you.
Thank you, NASCOM, for having us over and giving